The great chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with the sounds of 12 different species. Translators worked overtime as clicks, whistles, and harmonics filled the air. At the center of it all sat a simple wooden table that looked very out of place among all the advanced technology. Ambassador Chen Wei sat quietly at that wooden table. She was the only human in the room. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat style, and she wore a simple blue uniform with Earth's symbol on it. She did not speak much during these meetings, but she listened to everything. Today felt different. The other ambassadors were more excited than usual. They kept looking at her and whispering among themselves. Chun had read the agenda 3 times. She knew what was coming. The Alteran ambassador stood up first. She was tall and silver, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like stars. Her species had ruled a large part of the galaxy for thousands of years. They were proud of their long history and advanced technology. Fellow members of this great council, the Alteran began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. Today we discuss something very important: the safety and growth of all species in our galaxy. The other ambassadors nodded. The Zephyrian delegate, who looked like a living crystal, began to glow brighter. This meant he agreed. The bear-like Ursans grunted their approval. Even the floating gas being from Nebula 7 pulsed with supportive colors. We have lived in peace for many centuries, the Alteran continued. But peace requires wisdom. It requires careful thought and stable leadership. Some species have these qualities. Others do not yet have them. Chun felt every eye in the room turn to her. She kept her face calm and her hands still on the table. She had expected this for months. The Alteran pulled up a hologram that showed statistics and charts. Humans have been part of our council for 57 years. In that time, they have started 12 conflicts with other species. They have broken 18 trade agreements. They have caused 43 diplomatic incidents. Most of these were misunderstandings, Chun said quietly. Her voice was steady and polite. Exactly, the Alteran exclaimed. Misunderstandings caused by emotional thinking. Humans act with their hearts, not their minds. This makes them dangerous to galactic stability. The Zephyrian ambassador flickered and spoke in his mechanical voice. The data supports this conclusion. Human brain chemistry shows high levels of emotional activity. Their decisions are often based on feelings rather than logic. This creates unpredictable behavior patterns. Chun wanted to argue. She wanted to point out all the good things humans had done. The disasters they had helped with. The new technologies they had shared. The friendships they had built with dozens of species. But she stayed quiet and listened. We do not hate humans, the Alteran said, and she almost sounded like she meant it. They are a young species with great potential. But they need guidance. They need protection from their own worst impulses. The bear-like Ursan ambassador stood up on his back legs. What do you propose? Proposition 847, the Alteran announced. The regulation of primitive species integration protocols. We reclassify humans from provisional members to protected species. This means they keep all the benefits of council membership, but we make the important decisions for them. They would lose their vote? Asked the representative from the insect collective, her antenna twitching. Yes, but only until they prove they can think beyond their emotions. It might take a few hundred years, but we are patient. Around the room, ambassadors began to nod. Chun could see the vote forming before it even happened. These beings had already decided. This meeting was just a formality. I would like to say something, Chun said, standing up slowly. The room went quiet. All the clicking, humming, and buzzing stopped. Speak, the Alteran said, but not kindly. Chun looked around the room at beings she had worked with for years. Some had been to Earth. Some had human friends. She had hoped that would matter more. Humans understand that we are young, she began. "We know we make mistakes, but we learn from them. Every species here has made mistakes. The Alterans fought a war that lasted 300 years. The Zephyrians created machines that nearly destroyed their home planet. The Ursans enslaved 6 different species before they learned better. Several ambassadors shifted uncomfortably. These were old shamans they did not like to remember. But you all grew past your mistakes," Chun continued. "You became wise and strong. All we ask is the same chance to grow." The Alteran's eyes flashed brighter. "You have had 57 years. Your species had thousands of years," Chun replied calmly. "Enough," the Zephyrian interrupted. "The decision is logical. Humans are not ready for the responsibility of galactic governance. The data is clear. Then let us vote," the Alteran declared. One by one, the ambassadors cast their votes. The Alterans voted yes, of course. The Zephyrians voted yes. The Ursans voted yes. The Insect Collective voted yes. On and on it went. Only one species abstained. The Void Singers, mysterious beings who rarely spoke, simply remained silent. They did not vote yes or no. When it was over, the count was 11 yes, 0 no, 1 abstention. Chen's vote had not even been counted since the proposition was about her species. Proposition 847 passes, the Alteran announced with satisfaction. Effective immediately, humans are reclassified as a protected species under council oversight. Chun stood up and began packing her materials into a simple black case. Her movements were careful and precise. She did not hurry, but she did not waste time either. "The Terran Federation formally acknowledges this decision," she said without looking up. "We will respect the Council's wisdom." She closed her case and picked it up. Then she looked around the room one more time. "Thank you for 57 years of membership. We learned much." With that, she walked toward the exit. Her shoes made soft sounds on the metal floor. No one called after her. No one tried to stop her. The other ambassadors were already talking about other business. Just before Chun reached the door, she paused and looked back. The Void Singer representative, a being that looked like a living shadow, turned slightly toward her. For just a moment, their eyes met. Then Chun nodded once and left the chamber. The great wooden table sat empty where she had been. Within minutes, the other ambassadors had forgotten she was ever there. They had more important things to discuss. Trade agreements to negotiate. Resource rights to allocate. They did not notice that the Council's communication system had already started running a little slower. The translation matrix seemed slightly less accurate. Small things. Nothing important. After all, humans were just an emotional, young species that needed protection from themselves. What could they possibly have contributed to the smooth running of galactic civilization? The answer to that question would come soon enough. 3 months had passed since the vote, and the Galactic Council was pleased with itself. The Alteran ambassador often mentioned how smooth the transition had been. No protests from Earth. No angry messages. No emotional outbursts that humans were known for. See? She told the other council members during their weekly meeting. This proves we made the right choice. Humans needed firm guidance. Now they understand their place. The Zephyrian ambassador agreed with flashing lights. The data shows a 23.7% decrease in diplomatic incidents involving human emotions. Galactic stability has improved. Around the galaxy, life went on as normal. Or so it seemed. On the trade station orbiting Kepler 442, Station Manager Vex was having a frustrating day. The quantum communication array kept cutting out for a few seconds at a time. Nothing major, but enough to slow down important cargo transfers. When did this start? Vex asked his technical team. "About 2 months ago," replied his assistant, a nervous young Alteran. "We've run diagnostics 12 times. Everything looks normal. Vex rubbed his 3 eyes with his tentacles. The communication array was a hybrid system. The main processors were Zephyrian crystal technology, but the error correction algorithms were human-designed. Very elegant work, actually. The humans had a gift for making complex systems run smoothly. Have we contacted the human technical team that designed this? Vex asked. His assistant checked the records. I sent them a message last month. They replied that all technical support requests must go through official council oversight channels. And the oversight committee said they would review our request and get back to us in 6 to 8 months. Vex's eye stalks drooped. The old human team would have fixed this problem in a day, probably over a friendly meal in the station's cafe. Now everything had to go through bureaucracy. Just ignore the glitches for now, Vex decided. It's not that serious. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On Zephyr Prime, the planet's weather control system was running 3.2% less efficiently than normal. The system was mostly Zephyrian technology, but the prediction algorithms were human-designed. Without human meteorologists to update the pattern recognition software, the system was slowly falling behind on storm predictions. The scientific research station at Alpha Centauri was having even stranger problems. Their xenobiology lab was top of the line, built with technology from 6 different species. But the lab's MI system was acting odd. Dr. Chris Thorne, the human head of xenobiology, had always worked closely with the AI. She would ask it questions about alien biology, and it would provide detailed answers. More importantly, she would share her intuition about biological patterns, and the AI would incorporate that into its analysis. But Dr. Thorne wasn't talking to the AI anymore. When other scientists tried to use it, they got technically correct but somehow incomplete answers. I don't understand, complained Dr. Zell, a crystalline researcher. I asked the AI about the reproduction patterns of Andromedan moss, and it gave me 17 pages of data. But it doesn't make sense together. Dr. Thorne was in the lab, working quietly at her own station. She glanced over, but said nothing. Dr. Thorne, Dr. Zell said hopefully, could you help us understand this data? Thorne looked up with a polite smile. I'm sorry, but as a member of a protected species, I'm not qualified to advise on matters of galactic scientific importance. Perhaps you should contact the Council's Scientific Oversight Committee. Dr. Zell's crystalline body dimmed with confusion. But you're the head of this department. Not anymore, Thorne replied gently. The Council decided that humans lack the stability needed for important decisions. I wouldn't want to compromise your research with my emotional thinking. She went back to her work, focusing on a small sample of Earth moss. Just Earth moss. Nothing that could affect galactic science. The most serious problems were happening in the Council's own buildings. The translation system that allowed all the different species to understand each other was becoming less reliable. The system was incredibly complex. It didn't just translate words, it translated concepts, cultural meanings, and emotional context. A Zephyrian saying, the probability is 67.3%, meant something different than an Ursan saying. Maybe. The translation system had learned these subtle differences over decades, but the system's cultural context algorithms had been developed by human linguists. Humans had a strange gift for understanding how different minds worked. They could bridge the gap between the cold logic of the Zephyrians and the warm emotions of the Ursans. Now those human linguists were gone. The translation system still worked, but it was becoming more literal, more mechanical. The subtle meanings were disappearing. During a council session about trade routes, the Ursan ambassador said something that translated as, "This plan makes my heart sing with joy." 6 months ago, everyone would have understood this meant strong approval. Now, the Zephyrians spent 10 minutes trying to figure out what heart songs had to do with cargo shipping. Similar Misunderstandings were happening all over the galaxy. Business deals were falling through because of translation errors. Scientific collaborations were failing because researchers couldn't understand each other's true meaning. The Void Singers, who rarely spoke, finally said something during a council meeting. Communication is deteriorating, they whispered in their strange harmony of voices. Nonsense, the Alteran ambassador replied. The translation system works fine. Look at the technical specs. Technical function is not the same as understanding, the Void Singers replied. You have removed the bridge between minds. The other ambassadors didn't understand what they meant. The Void Singers went back to their usual silence, but some people were starting to notice patterns. Dr. Sarah Kim, a Zephyrian scientist, was analyzing efficiency reports from across the galaxy. She noticed that systems were running just a little bit worse. Nothing catastrophic, just small drops in performance. She created a map showing where the problems were happening. Then she overlaid another map showing where humans had been involved in design or maintenance. The patterns matched almost perfectly. Interesting, she said to herself in her mechanical voice. She tried to contact some human scientists to discuss her findings. The replies came back polite and formal. Thank you for your inquiry. However, as members of a protected species, we are not qualified to participate in galactic scientific discussions. Please direct your research questions to the appropriate council committees. Dr. Kim stared at her data for a long time. The numbers were clear, but she couldn't quite understand what they meant. There was a pattern here that her logical mind couldn't grasp. She needed someone who thought differently. Someone who could see connections that pure logic missed. Someone who could make intuitive leaps and find meaning in incomplete data. She needed a human, but humans were a protected species now. Too emotional and unstable for important work. Dr. Kim saved her research and filed it away. She had other projects to work on. More logical projects that didn't require human insight. Across the galaxy, the small problems continued to grow. Communication systems ran slower. Translation became more literal. Research projects lost their human spark. Trade networks became less efficient. But these were all small things. Tiny drops in performance. Nothing that seemed important to the great minds running the Galactic Council. After all, the humans had been quiet and well-behaved since the vote. Clearly, the Council had made the right decision. The cracks in galactic civilization were still small. But cracks have a way of growing, especially when no one is paying attention to them. And the humans? They were being very, very quiet. 6 months after the vote, the small problems had become big ones. The quantum relay network that connected the spiral arms of the galaxy started failing in sections. The network was a marvel of engineering, combining Zephyrian logic circuits with human intuitive programming. For 200 years, it had carried messages across impossible distances in seconds. Now, entire sectors were going dark. The Outer Rim colonies haven't had communication for 3 days, reported tech specialist Norn to the Council Emergency Committee. His crystalline body was flashing with stress patterns. The backup relays in Sector 7 failed yesterday. We're down to 60% network coverage. The Alteran committee leader drummed her 4 hands on the table. What's causing the failures? The logic circuits are fine, Norm replied. All the hardware is working perfectly, but the adaptive routing algorithms are breaking down. They can't predict where to send data when there's network congestion. Can't we just fix the algorithms? Norn's light dimmed. The algorithms were designed by human programmers. They use something called intuitive pattern matching. Our Zephyrian programmers can't understand how it works. It's not logical. The committee fell silent. The quantum network wasn't just important. It was essential. Without it, the galaxy would break apart into isolated regions. Contact the human programmers who designed it, ordered the Alteran. "We tried," Norm replied. "They said they're not qualified to work on galactic infrastructure as a protected species. They directed us to file a formal request with the Council Oversight Committee, then approve the request immediately. The Oversight Committee is backed up with requests. They estimate a review time of 18 months. The Altaran ambassador felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries. Panic. But the network problems were just the beginning. On Altair Prime, the most important planet in the Altaran Empire, a plague was spreading. The disease wasn't deadly to Altarans, but it was highly contagious and caused severe memory loss. Within days, millions of citizens couldn't remember how to do their jobs. The Altaran military tried to respond using their standard emergency protocols. These protocols had been tested in war games for decades. They should have worked perfectly, but they didn't. The protocols were too rigid, too predictable. They assumed enemies would behave logically and follow standard patterns. But plagues don't follow rules. They spread chaotically, jumping randomly from place to place. "We need flexible response teams," General Vex told the Emergency Council. "Teams that can adapt to unexpected situations." "Deploy the Special Forces," ordered the Council leader. We did. They're following Protocol 7 Alpha exactly. But the plague isn't responding to Protocol 7 Alpha. It's spreading in ways that don't make sense. General Vex paused, remembering something. In the old war games, humans always won when they were defending against plague scenarios. They ignored the protocols and did strange things, creative things. It worked, but we never understood why. "Contact the human military advisors," the council leader commanded. "They resigned 6 months ago," Vex replied quietly. "They said they were not qualified to advise on galactic security matters." The plague continued to spread. Altair Prime, the jewel of the galaxy's most powerful empire, began to shut down as its citizens forgot how to run their own civilization. Meanwhile, the Crystalline Confederacy was facing a crisis that threatened the foundation of galactic society itself. The interspecies translation system was dying. Chief Linguist Cal stood before the Confederacy's ruling council, her crystalline body flickering with distress. "The translation matrix is degrading faster than we anticipated. We're losing cultural context at an exponential rate." "Explain," commanded High Crystal Vorn. "The matrix doesn't just translate words. It translates meaning. When an Urson says, 'The wind speaks of danger,' everyone understands this means they sense trouble. When a Zephyrian says the probability favors caution, everyone knows this means they're worried." Kel projected a hologram showing the translation matrix. It looked like a vast web of connections, but many of the threads were fading. "The cultural context algorithms were built on human linguistic frameworks," she continued. "Humans have a unique ability to understand how different minds work. They can bridge the gap between logical species, like the Zephyrians, and emotional species, like the Ursans. Can't we rebuild these algorithms?" asked High Crystal Vorn. "We've tried. Our best linguists have worked on this for months. But we think too much like crystals. We understand structure and logic, but we don't understand feelings, intuition, the illogical ways that biological minds work." As if to demonstrate the problem, an Ursan diplomat tried to address the council. His words came through the translator as, "The sleeping earth dreams of tomorrow's water, while yesterday's fire burns in my chest cavity." The crystals stared at each other in confusion. 6 months ago, they would have understood this as, "I'm worried about our planet's future, but I'm also hopeful and determined." Now it was just gibberish. How long until complete breakdown? High Crystal Vorn asked. "At current rates? 2 months until translation becomes completely unreliable." The implications were staggering. Without communication, The galactic civilization would collapse into isolated species that couldn't understand each other. But the worst news was yet to come. 3 different species detected the same troubling readings from the edge of the galaxy. Strange energy patterns moving in from intergalactic space. Something vast and artificial approaching from beyond their home galaxy. The readings were forwarded to the Council's Threat Analysis Department. The department ran the data through their best analysis algorithms. The result was an 847-page report that concluded insufficient data to determine threat level. Recommend continued observation. Dr. Sarah Kim, the Zephyrian scientist who had been tracking system failures, was brought in to consult on the analysis. She stared at the data for hours. "There's a pattern here," she said finally, "but I can't see it. The energy signatures are chaotic, but there's an underlying structure." "Run more analysis algorithms," suggested her colleague. "We've run every algorithm we have. They all say the same thing. There's not enough data. But I think there is enough data. We're just looking at it wrong." Dr. Kim remembered working with human scientists on similar problems. Humans had a strange ability to see patterns in chaos. They could look at incomplete data and somehow understand what it meant. They called it intuition, but it was more than that. It was a different way of thinking. "We need a human to look at this," she said. "Humans are a protected species," her colleague reminded her. "They're not qualified for threat analysis." Dr. Kim stared at the data showing a possible threat to the entire galaxy. Somewhere out there, something was approaching. Something that might destroy everything they had built, and the species that had always been best at understanding unknown threats was forbidden from helping. "This is illogical," she said to herself, for the first time in her crystalline life. Dr. Kim wondered if logic wasn't always the best way to solve problems. The Alteran ambassador finally decided to contact Ambassador Chen Wei directly. She sent a priority message to Earth, marked with the highest diplomatic urgency codes. The reply came within hours. It was polite and formal. "The Terran Federation appreciates your inquiry. However, as a protected species under Council Regulation 847, humanity is not qualified to advise on matters of galactic security, infrastructure, or scientific research. Please direct your concerns to the appropriate Council oversight committees. We wish you success in resolving your challenges." The message was signed by someone called Diplomatic Protocol Assistant Number 7. Not even a real name. The Alteran ambassador stared at the message for a long time. Then she did something her proud species rarely did. She asked for help. "Council emergency session," she announced. "We have a problem." The other ambassadors gathered quickly. When they heard the reports about the network failures, the plague crisis, the translation breakdown, and the mysterious threat from beyond the galaxy, several of them began to panic. "We need human assistance," the Alteran said simply. "We made a mistake." "Impossible," the Zephyrian delegate replied, but his light was dim with uncertainty. The data clearly showed humans were too emotional for important decisions. "The data was incomplete," the Alteran replied. "We measured their weaknesses, but we ignored their strengths." For the first time since the vote, the Void Singers spoke up. "You have removed the galaxy's immune system," they whispered in their harmonious voice. "And now you wonder why it grows sick." The council chamber fell silent. Outside, the galaxy continued its slow spiral toward chaos, and somewhere on Earth, humans went quietly about their business, building something new while the old galaxy fell apart without them. 1 year after the vote, the Galactic Council was falling apart. The quantum communication network had collapsed in 4 sectors, leaving billions of people cut off from the rest of the galaxy. The translation matrix was so broken that 3 species had recalled their ambassadors, unable to communicate with anyone else. Trade between species had dropped by 60% because contracts couldn't be negotiated properly. But the worst problem was the approaching threat from beyond the galaxy. The object was now close enough to get better readings. It was massive, bigger than most space stations. It was clearly artificial, and it was definitely headed toward their galaxy. But after a full year of analysis, the Council's best scientists still had no idea what it was or what it wanted. "The energy signatures don't match anything in our databases," reported Dr. Zell to the Emergency Council session. "The movement patterns are chaotic but purposeful. It's like trying to understand a language we've never heard before." The Alteran ambassador had aged visibly in the past year. Her silver skin had lost its shine, and her forearms shook with stress. "How much time do we have?" "At current speed, it will reach our outer colonies in 9 years. 9 years to prepare for an unknown threat with broken communication systems and no way to coordinate a galactic defense. We need the humans," the Alteran said for the 100th time. The Zephyrian delegates' lights flickered with frustration. "The data clearly shows that humans are..." The data was wrong. The Alteran snapped. "We counted their weaknesses, but missed their strengths. They see patterns we can't see. They understand chaos in ways we never could." Around the chamber, other ambassadors nodded reluctantly. Even the proud species were starting to admit the truth. The Ursans had tried to handle the plague on Altair Prime using their own methods. Their strong, straightforward approach had failed completely. The plague continued to spread in unpredictable patterns that defied all logical containment strategies. The Crystalline Confederacy had given up trying to fix the translation system. Their perfectly logical minds couldn't understand the illogical ways that different species thought and felt. Even the advanced Zephyrians were struggling. Their quantum computers could process enormous amounts of data, but they couldn't make intuitive leaps or see meaning in incomplete information. "We have to try again," the Alteran said. "We have to convince them to help us." "We already tried," the Ursan delegate growled. "They said no." "Then we offer them something they want." What could they possibly want? They have their own territory, their own trade networks, their own technology. The Alteran was quiet for a moment. "We give them what we took away. We give them back their voice." The emergency session lasted for 6 hours. When it was over, the Council had voted unanimously to repeal Proposition 847. Humans would be restored to full membership immediately, with all voting rights and privileges. The Alteran ambassador personally drafted the message to Earth. She wrote it herself, not through diplomatic protocol assistance. She made it as clear and humble as her proud nature would allow. The Galactic Council formally invites humanity to resume full membership status. We acknowledge that Proposition 847 was an error in judgment. The galaxy faces serious challenges that require human insight and expertise. We need your help. The reply came within 24 hours. It was signed by Ambassador Chen Wei herself. The Alteran felt a moment of hope when she saw the familiar name. But the message itself was devastating. The Terran Federation is honored by this invitation. However, we must respectfully decline. Our status as a protected species has taught us valuable lessons about our own limitations. We have learned that we are not ready for the responsibilities of galactic citizenship. The message continued, as the Council wisely determined, humans are too young, too emotional, and too unstable for important galactic decisions. We shall continue to focus on our own development until we achieve the wisdom and stability required for such responsibilities. We appreciate the Council's patient guidance in helping us understand our place in the galaxy. The final line was the cruelest cut of all. We wish the Council success in resolving the current challenges facing galactic civilization. The Alteran. Read the message 3 times before its full meaning sank in. The humans were using the Council's own words against them. Every phrase was carefully chosen to echo what the Council had said about humanity. But there was something else in the message, a coldness that hadn't been there before. Ambassador Chun's previous communications had always been warm and friendly, even when she disagreed with the Council. This message was polite but distant, professional but not personal. They hate us, the Alteran realized. The Zephyrian delegate analyzed the message with his logical mind. Negative. The message contains no expressions of hatred or anger. It is simply a formal declination using established diplomatic language. That's exactly why it's so terrible, the Alteran replied. They don't hate us. They don't care about us at all anymore. She was right. Across human space, life was continuing without any reference to the Galactic Council. Humans had spent the past year building new relationships with species the Council had never contacted. They were exploring regions of space the Council considered too dangerous or too far away. Human ships were seen regularly at the galactic rim, making contact with independent worlds and small civilizations. These new allies were welcomed as equals, not managed as protected species. The humans weren't just moving on from the Council. They were building an alternative to it. As Sarah Kim received permission to travel to Earth and make a personal appeal. She hoped that scientist-to-scientist communication might work where diplomacy had failed. She found Dr. Chris Thorne still working at the research station at Alpha Centauri, but everything had changed. The lab was still there, but it was now focused entirely on human research projects. No more galactic science. No more collaboration with other species. Dr. Thorne, Dr. Kim said when they met, I need your help. We have data from the galactic rim that shows a possible threat, but we can't interpret it. We need someone who thinks differently. Dr. Thorne listened politely as Dr. Kim explained the energy readings and movement patterns. When the presentation was finished, Dr. Thorne was quiet for a long moment. I can see the pattern you're talking about, she said finally. It's obvious once you know how to look at it. Dr. Kim's crystalline body lit up with excitement. What is it? What does it mean? I'm sorry, Doctor. Thorne replied gently. But I'm not qualified to advise on galactic security matters. As a member of a protected species, my emotional thinking might lead to dangerous conclusions. But the people could die if we don't understand this threat. Then, I suggest you contact the Council's Oversight Committee. They have the wisdom and stability needed for such important decisions. Dr. Kim felt something crack inside her logical mind. You're being deliberately obtuse. You know exactly what that data means, and you're refusing to help out of spite. Dr. Thorne's expression didn't change. Spite is an emotional response. As the Council determined, humans are too emotional for important decisions. I wouldn't want my spite to compromise galactic security. This isn't a game. Dr. Kim's light flashed with desperation. The entire galaxy could be destroyed. Then perhaps the Council should have thought of that before deciding we were too dangerous to trust with important decisions. Dr. Thorne replied calmly. Dr. Kim left Earth empty-handed and heartbroken. But she carried something else with her, the terrible understanding that the humans weren't just refusing to help. They were watching the Council fail, and they didn't care. Back in the Council chambers, the reports kept getting worse. The mysterious object from intergalactic space had been joined by others. The threat was growing, and they still had no idea how to respond to it. The Void Singers, who had been silent for months, finally spoke again during a council session. The humans are building something new, they whispered. While you cling to what is dying, they create what will live. What do you mean? The Alteran asked. Go to the rim. See what they do with species that are not protected. See how they treat equals instead of children. The Alteran didn't understand, but she sent scouts to the galactic rim anyway. What they found was shocking. Humans had made contact with dozens of species the Council had never met. Small civilizations, young races, independent worlds, all of them working together as equals. No protected species. No oversight committees. Just cooperation and friendship. The scouts watched human ships working alongside beings the Council would have classified as too primitive or too dangerous for galactic membership. But these partnerships were thriving. They were building new technologies, exploring new regions of space, and creating something the galaxy had never seen before. A true alliance of equals. They're not just refusing to help us, the Alteran reported to the Council. They're replacing us. The Council chamber fell silent as the full scope of their mistake became clear. They hadn't just lost humanity's help. They had driven humans to create a competing civilization that was already more successful than their own, and the approaching threat from beyond the galaxy grew closer every day. While the Council grew weaker and more divided, the humans had moved beyond needing the Council's approval. Now the question was, would the Council survive long enough to learn from its mistakes? 2 years after the vote, the galaxy was breaking apart. The mysterious objects from intergalactic space were now confirmed as a massive intelligence harvesting swarm. They consumed information and technology from civilizations, leaving empty husks behind. The Council's rigid defense plans had proven completely inadequate against an enemy that changed tactics constantly. 3 species had already left the Council entirely, forming their own regional alliances. The Ursans were building military partnerships with warrior races the Council had never contacted. The Crystalline Confederacy was working on translation technologies with species that thought in mathematical concepts rather than words. Even the proud Zephyrians were questioning their loyalty to the Council. Their logical minds could see that the organization was failing, and they were starting to look for alternatives. The quantum communication network was down to 30% functionality. Trade had collapsed between many regions. The galaxy was fragmenting into isolated groups that could barely talk to each other. And through it all, human ships continued to move freely along the galactic rim, building their new alliance with anyone willing to treat them as equals. The Alteran ambassador had tried everything. Formal diplomatic requests, personal appeals, even threats and bribes. Nothing worked. The humans remained politely uninterested in helping the Council with its problems. Finally, she decided to make one last attempt. Not as an ambassador, but as a person. She took a small personal ship to Earth, without any diplomatic escort or formal protocols. She came alone, carrying only a simple message: please. She found Ambassador Chen Wei in a place she never expected, a small garden outside the former Terran diplomatic complex. Chen was kneeling among flowers, her hands dirty with soil, wearing simple clothes instead of her formal uniform. Ambassador, the Alteran said quietly. Chen looked up with mild surprise. Former ambassador, she corrected gently. I'm just a gardener now. Humans are too emotional for diplomatic work, remember? The Alteran felt pain cut through her. She had hoped for anger, which could be negotiated with. Instead, she found something much worse: indifference. Your people are dying, the Alteran said desperately. Not just mine, everyone. The galaxy is falling apart, and those things from intergalactic space are getting closer every day. You have the power to help, and you do nothing. Chun didn't look up from her flowers. Her voice was calm and measured. We are a protected species. Young, unstable, violence-prone. Surely you wouldn't want us making decisions that might affect galactic stability? You're making your point. We understand. We were wrong. What do you want? Chun finally stopped working and looked at her visitor. Nothing, nothing? Nothing from the Council, Chun clarified. We learned a valuable lesson from our time as a protected species. The galaxy functions best when species are valued for their contributions, not managed for their limitations. Chun stood up and brushed the dirt from her hands. We're building our own networks now, with peoples who see us as partners, not children. And the council? The council will endure, or it won't. That's not our decision to make anymore. Chun picked up her gardening tools. After all, we're not qualified to advise on such matters. The Alteran felt desperation rising in her chest. But you could save us. All of us. Those creatures from beyond the galaxy. You're the only ones who understand that kind of chaos. Your pattern recognition abilities, your intuitive thinking, your ability to bridge different minds. We need that. Needed, Chun corrected. Past tense. You needed that 2 years ago. Now you want it back because you're in trouble. Yes, the Alteran said simply. We want it back because we're in trouble. Chun smiled sadly. At least you're being honest now. But it's too late. Why? Because you didn't just vote us out of the council. You taught us something important about ourselves. The Alteran waited for her to continue. You taught us that we don't need your permission to be who we are, Chun explained. For centuries, humanity tried to fit into the galaxy you built. We followed your rules, accepted your judgment, sought your approval, even when it meant suppressing our own nature. Chun gestured toward the sky, where the shapes of human ships could be seen moving between the stars. But when you rejected us, you freed us. You forced us to remember that we can build our own civilization, with our own rules, our own values, our own definition of what civilization should be. The Alteran felt cold understanding creep over her. You're not punishing us. You've moved beyond us. Exactly. We're not angry at the council anymore. We're grateful to it. It taught us to stop seeking approval and start creating alternatives. Chun walked toward the garden gate, then paused and looked back. Do you know what we're building out there on the rim? She asked. Some kind of alliance. A civilization where species aren't classified as protected or provisional or acceptable. Where young races aren't managed by older ones. Where emotional thinking is valued alongside logical thinking. Where mistakes are learning opportunities, not evidence of unfitness. The Alteran's 4 hands trembled. And the council? The council is welcome to continue as it is. You have your perfect little club of stable, logical, emotionally controlled species. You don't need chaotic humans disrupting your careful order. But we do need you, the Alteran whispered. We always did. Chun nodded sadly. I know. But you only realized it when the alternative was extinction. That's not partnership. That's desperation. What would it take? What would we have to do to earn another chance? Chun considered the question seriously. Prove that you've learned something. Show us that you understand the difference between cooperation and control. Demonstrate that you see other species as partners, not as problems to be managed. How? Start with the species you've already written off as too primitive or too unstable. The ones you've decided aren't ready for galactic civilization. Invite them as equals. Learn from them instead of managing them. Chun opened the garden gate and stepped through. But don't do it for us. Do it because it's right. Do it because diversity makes civilization stronger, not weaker. The Alteran stood alone in the garden as Chun walked away. In the distance, she could see human ships departing Earth, heading not toward council space, but toward the galactic rim, where new species waited to be met as equals. She understood now what the Void Singers had meant. The humans hadn't just left the council. They had evolved beyond the need for it. Back in council space, the reports continued to get worse. The harvesting swarm was now only 7 years away. The communication networks were failing faster. Species were withdrawing into their own territories, unable to coordinate any kind of unified response. The Alteran returned to the council chambers and made her final report. Humanity will not help us, she told the assembled ambassadors. Not because they can't, but because they've moved beyond caring about our problems. Then we face this threat alone, the Zephyrian delegate said. No, the Alteran replied. We face this threat with the civilization we chose to build. A civilization based on hierarchy and control instead of partnership and cooperation. A civilization that values conformity over diversity. A civilization that manages its members instead of learning from them. She looked around the chamber at her fellow ambassadors. Most of them were the same beings who had voted to make humans a protected species 2 years ago. They had seemed so wise then, so stable and logical and mature. Now they looked like what they were, the leaders of a dying civilization that had forgotten how to grow. The humans offered us a lesson, the Alteran continued. They showed us what happens when you value contributions over conformity, when you treat partners as equals instead of children, when you build with diversity instead of despite it. And we rejected that lesson, the Ursan delegate growled. We did. And now we'll live with the consequences. Outside the council chambers, the galaxy continued its slow collapse. But on the rim, something new was being born. Something chaotic and diverse and creative and strong, the council had made its choice 2 years ago when it voted to protect humanity from its own nature. Now humanity was protecting the galaxy from the council's nature by building something better. Harvesting Swarm drew closer every day, and the council still had no effective plan to stop it. Their rigid thinking and hierarchical structure couldn't adapt to face such an alien threat, but that was their problem to solve now. Humanity had withdrawn, silently and completely. They were busy building a civilization that could face any challenge because it was built on the principle that every voice had value, even the chaotic, emotional, unpredictable voices, especially those the council would have to answer for its actions. But humanity would not be there to hear the judgment. They had found something better than approval. They had found freedom. And with that freedom, they were building a future that didn't need the council's permission to exist. In her garden on Earth, Ambassador Chen Wei continued tending her flowers. They were chaotic and diverse and beautiful, growing in patterns that no logical mind would design, but that somehow worked perfectly together. Just like the civilization humanity was building among the stars.